What's happening, gamers? I'm a swordsman now. Why don't they go for 20 bucks? Might as well put it to good use. This might be harder than I thought. So it seems to cut something you need edge alignment, footing, technique. This is all too complicated. Can I just press the Y button?
Video games and swords go together like peanut butter and more peanut butter. People have an inherent drive to wield a blade, swinging it around, cutting down foes like a samurai. Only problem? That's murder. This is where video games come in to fill that void.
So if I'm going to become a swordsman, I need to understand what makes video game swords so beloved. For this, I'm going to be ranking some of the most famous swords in gaming on 3 factors. 1. Gameplay. How fun is it to use? How good is it in game? Does it make you feel bad? 2. The lore. How important is it to the story and the game as a whole? And 3. That X Factor, baby! How does it set itself apart from the crowd? Each factor will get a rating of 0 to 5. That wasn't a sound effect. I can just say that. Starting things off, we got the Monado from Xenoblade Chronicles. Oh! Right in my f***ing nose! You f***er!
First thought looking at it, the Monado's pretty fucking cool. It has this mechanical future-y vibe that I really dig. The blade may look dull, but that's only because it is. Instead, when activated, it emits a beam of light that does the cutting, which doesn't just look cool, but also fits lore-wise, because in its base form, the Monado can't cut people, instead cutting the main villains, the Mechon, a mechanical race that can only be damaged with the Monado. This makes it incredibly important lore-wise, with pretty much the whole game being built around the Monado and more importantly where it came from, with no one in-universe actually knowing what it is. This ties into a larger mystery of the game with there being all this ancient technology around that no one understands anymore. This is why the sword looks so much more complex than any other weapon. Speaking of which, because the story sets it up as the only weapon that can defeat the Mechonis, it's the only sword Shulk gets to use, even though every other character gets multiple weapons they can equip. This is part of the problem with making your sword too lore relevant. At some point you have to take away the player's agency in order to fit the story. A game I think solves this problem better is actually Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Similarly to the original, the game is built around the bond between the player and their main weapons. Literally, the player collects core crystals throughout the game, and when a character bonds with them, they take a humanoid form called a blade. The character will then wield their blade's weapon in battle, with different blades having different abilities. There are dozens of blades you can get. You can even get Shulk and the Monado as a blade if you have the DLC. Story-wise, the most important blades are Pyra, Mithra, and Redacted for spoilers, who are set up as the most powerful blades, with Pyra being the first blade the main character bonds with. The game doesn't let you unequip them, but it does let you equip extra blades you can switch to. Even if you could unequip them though, the game does a good job of making it so you don't really want to. And fitting with the lore, these really are some of the most powerful blades in the game. Having Mithra equipped at max level fully recharges arts when landing a critical hit, greatly speeding up gameplay. This also helps with a lot of people's main issue with Xenoblade, being the combat. If you don't know what you're doing, it seems like a lot of the characters are just standing around auto-attacking until you get to use an art. But once you dive deep into the mechanics, it becomes a lot more about putting your characters in the right position, so that when you're fully charged, you can hit some insane combos on enemies. It's a shame, because Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is my 3rd favorite game of all time, and I think a lot more people would get why if they just gave it a shot. But they never will, because Xenoblade might have the worst X Factor of anything ever. They are very unapologetic JRPGs. The Monado just screams over-designed JRPG sword, and Pyra and Mithra got huge f***ing titties. I f*** with it.
With it a lot.
But most people see this, cringe, and instantly switch to FIFA. Something that is definitely not helped by a certain someone who will go unnamed who made Xenoblade the face of cringe JRPGs and made hating it the cool thing to do. Not that I'm mad about that. Lore-wise, they both get a 5. Gameplay-wise, I'm also giving them a 5 for being the strongest sword in their respective games. And because no matter what anyone else says, I think the gameplay's really fun. And X Factor wise, they both gotta get a 0. Being the exact opposite of a cringy RPG, we have an FPS with the Halo Energy Sword. This is a weapon developed by the villain faction The Covenant, being a holy blade that only the most skilled warriors get to wield. A superheated plasma is released by the hilt that is then held in place by a gravitational field. The plasma doesn't actually cut, instead instantly boiling anything that comes in contact with it. It's not the most complex lore-wise, but that's honestly what works best for a game like Halo. Like I said, opposite of a JRPG. Everything doesn't need to be built around a magic sword, it's just a core weapon with some flavor text that adds immersion. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty unique in terms of swords. Being an FPS, it's basically a shotgun, While it doesn't shoot, if you get close enough you'll lunge at your opponent and deal huge damage. This lunge also allows for some movement tech that's important for speedruns. And with players not having the ability to sprint until Halo 4, the faster movement added another reason to use it. The problem though is in Halo 4 they did add sprinting, and because of this a lot of people found the sword was just too fast, allowing a player with it to sprint around the map getting kills with little anyone could do to stop them. Problem that persisted for years. At least I heard it did. I had never actually played a Halo game before looking into the energy sword and got most of my information on the meta from a video by Late Night Gaming.
I just spent like 5 minutes talking about how much I love Xenoblade. Are you really surprised my knowledge on Halo balancing is lacking?
I can appreciate the design though. I especially like the grip. It being in the middle of the blade makes it feel less like a sword and more like a talon. Something a predator like alien race would use to carve up people. It would have insane X factor if it wasn't for the fact that Halo as a whole has lost a lot of its impact over the years. People generally say this started with Halo Reach, when the original developer Bungie handed over control to 343 Industries, a studio made by Microsoft just for developing Halo. Switching developers will almost always lead to a drop in quality, because they just don't understand the franchise like the original creators. What's even worse though is when you switch studios with the same studio. The most recent Halo game is Halo Infinite, a live service game which 343 said would be the next 10 years of Halo. The problem? Microsoft thought 343 Industries was mostly contract workers, because if they hired real staff then after 18 months they would need to give them employee benefits. So every 18 months they hire new developers, those developers spend a few months learning how the game's code and engine works, and then when they finally figure it out, they ditch them and bring in new workers, basically switching studios without switching studios. This made it so that developers could never fully understand the game, slowing down production dramatically, which is pretty for a live service game where you need to constantly pump out new content. I can't even imagine the thought process that would lead to something so stupid. Okay, I can, but it's still stupid. This hellish development led to a lack of content, causing Infinite to hard fall off after just a few months. And now I hardly hear anyone talk about Halo, which sucks for what used to be such an iconic franchise. Then again, I never hear anyone talk about Call of Duty, yet every year the new game sells like 12 tetrezillion copies, so what do I know, maybe Halo Infinite's the most played game of all time. 2.5 on gameplay because of balancing, 3 on lore, 3 on icon factor. But even if Halo's not talked about much anymore, it still says a lot to how iconic a good sword can be, that in the game built around guns, the one sword is the most famous weapon.
I'm not cut out for talk about FPS. Back to RPGs! The Keyblade! Come on!
These are the main weapons of the Kingdom Hearts franchise, being wielded by numerous characters, like Roxas, Aqua, and Michael Mouse. They're able to open and shut any lock, in particular the lock between worlds. The strongest Keyblade is the X-Blade, which is the only Keyblade that can unlock the world Kingdom Hearts, which is the source of all true light in the universe, so naturally, the main villain wants it for himself. It's not really fair to rank all the Keyblades as a concept though. I didn't rank every Xenoblade Chronicles 2 blade, I ranked Pyra and Mythra, especially because if you ask someone who hasn't played Kingdom Hearts to think of a Keyblade, they're not gonna think of the X-Blade. They're gonna think, what the hell are you talking about? But if you ask someone who hasn't played Kingdom Hearts, but has played Smash Bros to think of a Keyblade, they're gonna think of Sora and the Kingdom Key. Lore-wise, it's pretty important, being the first Keyblade Sora awakened at the beginning of the franchise. In every other aspect though, it suffers from what I like to call first weapon syndrome. Throughout the games you get keychains that change the Keyblade's abilities and appearance, and because the Kingdom Key is the first one you get, it's quickly outpaced by literally any other keychain, so you won't really see it that much. I must say though, they did manage to do this in a way that doesn't damage the lore. Each character only gets one Keyblade, but they get around this by making it so Sora changes keychains instead of the blade itself. I also have to put respect on this keychain for being the only Disney reference from Kingdom Hearts to make it into Smash Bros. Goofy got replaced with a boat, but I'm glad the Mickey ears made it. Plus, in some games it's not even a bad option. In Kingdom Hearts 2 it halves the damage taken when at low health. It's still nowhere near the strongest blade, but it's still a reason to use it if you really want to. While the X-Blade is definitely more important lore-wise and has more power, the Kingdom Key still has that X-Factor, baby. It has it in spades. This is just the perfect design for a weapon in a Final Fantasy and Disney crossover. Final Fantasy is known for having these cool and practical weapons, which the Keyblade definitely fits. It's not even really sharp, it's more of a giant metal club Sora carries around. And because of this, it's just goofy enough to fit with the Disney world. Originally it was gonna be a chainsaw-like weapon, which would be cool and impractical, but just too serious. The Keyblade though, has its cool moments, while still feeling cutesy enough that it's not out of place when Mickey Mouse holds it. For gameplay, it gets a 2. Lore-wise, it gets a 4, and X Factor, it also gets a 4. I was really close to giving it a 5, but it gets held back because despite having so much X Factor, it doesn't even have the most X Factor in its own games. Because that's definitely Cloud, and while it's covered in bandages, that's definitely the Buster Sword. This is one of the most iconic swords, period. Not just in gaming. First off, like I said, cool and practical weapons are a staple of Final Fantasy. And there's no simpler way to do that than just making it really f***ing big. Big swords are always a surefire hit in anime. That's why all 3 of the big 3 have them, with One Piece's Yoru, Bleach's Zangetsu, and Naruto's Kurakiri Bocho. And they were all riding the wave started by Final Fantasy VII. FF7 itself also seems to be inspired a lot by Berserk, with the game being about an edgy spiky-haired guy with a big sword fighting a beautiful silver-haired man with a long sword. The Buster Sword is still really unique though. It doesn't look like some specially crafted blade like Guts' Dragon Slayer. It looks like something Cloud cobbled together, bolting a piece of scrap metal onto a handle. This fits with him being a mercenary for hire at the beginning of the game, taking whatever jobs he can to get by. Most important in its fame though, has to be this title screen. Final Fantasy VII completely changed RPGs when it came out. It was the moment where a lot of people realized the rich stories video games could tell. And what do you see every time you open it? The Buster Sword. Light shimmering down on it, while a beautiful piano plays in the background. It's enough to make you forget that you ditch it almost immediately. The Buster Sword may have the worst case of first weapon syndrome of any video game sword. Within just a few hours you get the Mithril Saber and never look back. As well, there is virtually no lore behind it. It really is just something Cloud happened to put together until he found something better. I feel like the marketing plays a heavy role in why the Buster Sword is so famous. Cloud's always seen using it in promotional material, on the cover, in other games. Hell, even in Advent Children he's using a sword that looks pretty close. And all this distracts me from the fact that in-game, it's basically non-existent. I'd still call it one of the best swords in gaming though. It earns a 5. Hell, I'll give it a 7 on X Factor. But being fair, on gameplay, 0, and lore, another 0. So why am I out here? Because I'm training! What's wrong with the yoga mat? That's a stupid idea. I'm a great swordsman. I need to be out in wilderness. Snow befalling my blade. Cold on the outside, but warm by the fire in my heart. Okay, but why am I out here? That was the camera, dipsh. Watch! Look at I effortlessly cut that tree down. No, I meant like that. You got it? You see, this wouldn't be a problem if my sword could cut for me. Which is why I'm glad there's Honedge. Introduced in Pokemon X and Y, Honedge is a Steel Ghost type Pokemon. Like 90% of Pokemon, it has very little story importance, with all its lore being relegated to the Pokedex. According to it, Honedge is possessed by the soul of someone who is killed by the blade, and if someone tries to use it as a sword, it will wrap its blue cloth around them and drain their life force. Honestly, fair reaction. If I tried to use a Pikachu as a mace, everyone would get upset. But just because this Pokemon has a convenient handle, suddenly people think it's okay? Where Honedge really begins to shine though, is when it evolves into Aegislash, with this thing absolutely dominating the competitive scene for a while. At first glance it doesn't look like anything special, having pretty low attack stats in exchange for high defense. But that's only if we ignore its ability stance change. Aegislash starts the battle in shield mode, but once it uses an attacking move it switches to blade mode, where its attack and defense flip. Then if it uses King Shield, it goes back to shield mode. King Shield is also a variation on the move Protect, which is already one of the best moves in competitive Pokemon, always moving first and blocking any attack for a turn. King Shield was even better though, because it came with the benefit that if a contact move hit the shield, the opponent's defense would be reduced by 2 stages. So here's the average match against an Aegislash. It starts in shield mode, and because it's really slow, the opponent probably moves first and has their attack tanked. Then Aegislash attacks, switching to blade mode, dealing massive damage. Then the next turn it uses King Shield, moves first, blocks the opponent's attack, lowers their defense, and now it's a tank again. Rinse and repeat. All this led to it eventually getting nerfed in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Ironically, with the amount King Shield reduced defense being decreased, and its attack and defense being lowered slightly, bringing it down to a more acceptable level. and currently it's completely absent in Scarlet and Violet. Outside of competitive Pokemon though, I feel like it really has no X factor. It's cool as a Pokemon, but most of its notoriety is from how well it could dominate a factor of the Pokemon community most players don't even interact with. For all this, it gets a 2 in lore, 5 in gameplay, and 2.5 in X factor. On the topic of competitive viability though, we gotta look at maybe the most famous sword in a competitive game. The Counter-Strike knife. What is a knife but a really short sword? This can be found in both CSGO and its more modern replacement Counter-Strike 2. Gameplay wise, it's your standard melee option, being good for stabbing opponents at close range without using ammo. Still though, it's almost never used in competitive, from what I can tell. Again, I don't play FPS. That's fine though, because stabbing actually isn't what it's for. Its main function is to be toured around in CSGO surf videos. Yo guys, this is Slinky Schlonkers, and today I found maybe the most cringiest, most triggering person on the whole entire internet. I swear, every minute of watching the videos is like having my balls dragged through a field of broken glass, and then at the end when I think it's finally over, a goat comes up and starts licking them clean. I do not respect women. These videos were a staple of old YouTube. Just a guy playing a CSGO surf map talking about whatever. Usually internet drama or fake stories from their life. It was of course popularized by former icon current permanently banned Leafy is here. This guy may be scum, but he was honestly a YouTube algorithm genius. He realized that the easiest videos to pump out daily were just him talking about whatever. But back then, YouTube was a very different landscape. While commentary videos are booming now, it used to be all about gaming. So by talking over CSGO Surf, his videos would be classified as gaming and pushed more in the algorithm, without him actually having to be good at a video game. The gameplay also acted as a way to keep people's attention. While Leafy talked about how Keemstar was a big meanie, he could jingle keys in front of his viewers by hitting a sick jump. While Surf was the most popular, it really just had to be any game the viewer could watch without paying too much attention to, which is why a simple movement-based game like CSGO Surf worked really well. While Leafy's style of commentary video mostly died as the internet moved away from its edgy teen years, its ghost can still be seen in stuff like Subway Surfers, Am I the Asshole TikToks. All this though led to CSGO Surf videos getting millions of views, and front and center, or more like bottom and right, was the knife, making it maybe one of the most viewed items in video game history. And if that's not enough, it's also one of the most expensive. There are 2 ways to get a knife. Most popular is cases. These are random loot boxes with about a 0.26% chance of containing a knife, or about 1 in 400 cases. But just having a knife isn't enough. What's its color, pattern, is it a huntsman, butterfly, karambit? All this adds value. You could just use the free basic knife. That's only if you're poor. If you want your teammates to respect you, you're gonna need some glitz and glamour. If you don't want to take your odds with the slots, there's always option number 2, the Steam Marketplace. People sell knives that they got from cases. There you could just buy the knife you want, if you're not planning on eating this month. But what if you want to be the most respected man in any lobby? To get every bitch in town, well then you'd need what's not only the most expensive knife, but most expensive item in Counter-Strike in general. The case-hardened factory new pattern 387 Blue Gem Karambit. Only one of these has ever been pulled, and it is believed to be worth $1.4 million. Gameplay-wise, it gets a 1, you don't really use it much. Lore-wise though, 0, it's literally just a knife. But X Factor, considering that it's been viewed millions of times, and has people willing to spend more than the price of a house on one, the Counter-Strike knife has to get a 5. Keeping on track with first-person shooters, we have Genji from Overwatch. He's a cyborg ninja who wields a sword for some of his attacks. Nipping around and cutting people up is honestly pretty fun. I can't do this, man. I can't. That's as much as I'm willing to talk about Overwatch. I'm not even grading it. I did kind of break my one sword rule, though, by talking about CSGO knife in general. But considering they're literally just the same knife with different skins, I think it's fine. But I wonder, who in gaming would have the most actually different cool swords? I know, Roronoa Zoro. He's from the One Piece franchise and has been in a number of games ranging from arena fighters to RPGs. Swords are pretty important in the One Piece world, with the best ones getting graded. At the top is Supreme Grade, which is where the previously mentioned Yoru sits. Under that is Great Grade with swords Wataruchi Munde, Enma, and his old sword Sushui. Then there's Skillful Grade, and finally is just graded swords, with Zoro Sendai Kitetsu. That one looks kinda familiar. While individually none of them will be the coolest, he makes up for it by using 3 at once, with his patented 3-sword style. This encapsulates everything I love about One Piece. It's able to take something so ridiculous and run with it to the point where it loops back around to being the most badass thing ever. Name one other manga where the best characters are a guy with a sword in his mouth, a kickboxing chef, and a guy made of rubber. It's stuff like this that's why I honestly can't imagine Oda ever intended One Piece to last so long. This just doesn't seem like a power set that would be easy to write 1,000 chapters about. And the fact that he somehow does is why he's the absolute GOAT. But Frog, you said this was about video game swords. Was this really all just an excuse for you to show your favorite manga? No. And to be fair, I won't even give Zoro a grading. Because this is actually an excuse to show my second favorite manga, Kagurabachi! Read it. You gotta read it right now. It is just a never-ending series of seeing the raw shit you've ever seen in your life just for the next chapter to top it. So, this guy Kunishige Rokuhira made 6 really strong swords called the Enchanted Blades. Then this guy John took them and killed him. So his son Chihiro Rokuhira has to use the 7th Enchanted Blade to get them back. This may seem like your typical edgy MC revenge story, but it is so much more than that. I promise they are the real beating heart at the center of this story. Every few years we get a big shonen darling. Think My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen. And I'm willing to bet my life savings Kagurabachi is next. It's about $50 in this lighter. Well, there's no Kagurabachi game yet. I can't wait for the day there's a Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash style arena fighter that plays like ass, and I'm gonna be there day one. And while I'm sure this will change when it gets more popular, for now the fandom's just really fun to be in. Here's an insane fan animation made by Endo on Twitter, and here's the guy shooting Kagurabachi after finding out his crush is a lesbian. It's a clean Kagura sweep in my books. Kagura billion out of 5 in all categories. So I think I gotta maybe step into it. Spin attack! I don't think the sword is working.
What'd you say you got it?
Goodwill?
Yeah, that's not gonna cut.
Well, I'm open to suggestions. I mean, anything's gotta be better than this. But where are we gonna find a sword all the way out here?
Give this bad boy a try.
I take it back, this is not better. This is how you make an iconic sword. I don't think the Counter-Strike knife is the most viewed sword, but this might be the actual, most popular, people actively pay attention to a sword in gaming. And how could it not be coming from the best-selling game of all time? While it's since lost its title of strongest sword to Netherite, for a solid 10 years, this was the peak you could reach in Minecraft. Once you had a diamond sword, you were made. And if you were the first to get it on a server, congratulations on becoming god of the new world. It's also just the ultimate flex. It's a soul made of diamond for crying out loud. And maybe I'm letting the nostalgia talk, but for such a simple design, I think it's really great. It just looks valuable, something you should feel accomplished for having. And that shade of blue just scratches a particular itch in my brain. I've heard YouTubers talk about this too. The blue in a diamond sword just looks more eye-catching for a thumbnail than the dull purple of netherite. Though in game, I gotta say I like the netherite more. It just feels like something otherworldly. A weapon forged in the fire of the nether, not meant to be wielded by man. Much more fitting for endgame gear. Diamond still has a place though, being the primary weapon in competitive Minecraft. Allow me to explain. Minecraft combat can be split into 2 categories, pre and post 1.9. The 1.9 update adds this cooldown bar. When you hit something it appears, and if you attack again before it's filled you do a lot less damage, forcing players to time their hits. This was very controversial, so a lot of Minecraft servers chose to just ignore it. The most popular server Hypixel, which houses most of the competitive game modes like Duels, Skywars, and Bed Wars, uses a series of plugins that attempt to negate the cooldown bar. They're not perfect though, which is why Hypixel encourages players to just play using the 1.8 update of the game. And since Netherite wasn't added until 1.16, Diamond reigns supreme. It's for the best it's not here too. A key factor in 1.8 combat is knockback, being used to send people into the void in games like Bed Wars and Skywars. And since Netherite armor has the secondary effect of reducing knockback, it will completely kill this element of the game. 1.8 combat as a whole fascinates me, because without the cooldown bar, the name of the game is just mashing that mouse button as fast as possible. It's how I learned to do this. They called me the human jackhammer in high school. This is called jitter clicking. It's where you flex your arm muscle to vibrate your finger into the mouse. But real mashers get way more technical. To explain, we need to understand, what is a click? Well, in a mouse, mechanical keyboard in this dock is a switch, which has 2 main components, the stem and the contact. The stem blocks 2 pieces of metal on the contact from touching each other. When pressed though, the stem moves, The two metal pieces touch, and electric current passes through them, registering a click. But what Minecraft PvPers take advantage of is that when you press a button, these contacts can vibrate a bit, causing what's called a double click, where the contacts hit multiple times, registering multiple clicks for one press. This can be intentionally caused by methods like butterfly clicking. This may look like they're just using two fingers to click faster, but they're actually using a rhythm that vibrates the mouse's contacts, creating over 20 clicks per second. There's also drag clicking, rubbing your finger on the mouse to create friction that vibrates the contacts. Most mice actually have software though, that prevents two clicks from being registered too close to each other, in order to prevent double clicking. I mean, think about it. Outside of this very specific circumstance, your mouse registering extra clicks only creates problems, so players need very specific mice. The Glorious model is always a popular choice, with it letting users turn off their double click protections. Outside of that though, it's mostly cheap mice like the Bloody mice that don't have any to begin with, or even decade-old Razer Vipers that allow double clicking. I just think it's cool how fast a combat system as simple as more clicks means more damage snowballed into a game of who can find the most f***ed up mouse. That was definitely not intended when adding the diamond sword. But hey, isn't doing stuff the devs never intended the whole point of Minecraft? X Factor wise, it's getting a 5. Gameplay wise, I'd also give it a 5 if it was just 1.8, but because the combat system the devs actually intend for you to use is a lot less interesting, I'm docking it to a 3. And lore? Oh shit, I completely forgot to talk about the lore. You make it out of rocks you find in the ground, one I guess.
IRL though, here, take this. I could see someone using these little grooves to catch a sword and deflect it, but they're not really sharp, which is good because the serrated edge makes it a war crime. It would be a pretty sick club, but it's made of foam, so I don't really think it's cutting anything. Are you f***ing kidding me? Well, back to swords that are bullshit. There can only be one greatest sword in gaming. One that completely changed my life and many others. It's gotta be none other than Calibur from Sonic and the Black Knight, baby! Greatest game ever made! So good, I based my entire personality around it and started a cult. Right off the bat, as soon as we boot it up, we have a 10 out of 10 opening cutscene. And you know what, I think that's all I can emotionally handle right now. 5 across the board. Don't look at me like that. So what if I started a cult based around a game I never played? You think Jesus ever read the Bible? Alright, I get it. It's not a fair competition. So the real, number 1, greatest sword in all of gaming? For me, there's no other answer. It has to be the Master Sword. It first appeared in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and has been a staple of the series ever since. Lore-wise, its origin can be tracked all the way back to the first game in the Zelda timeline, Skyward Sword. There it's made by upgrading Link's Goddess Sword using the 3 Sacred Flames, giving it the ability to repel evil, an ability Link used to seal the final boss demise inside it. Upon defeat though, he utters a curse, that his hatred will forever be reborn, and tied to it will be the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero. This sets up basically every other Zelda game, with Zelda and Link being reincarnated in order to defeat the evil Ganon, and often necessary in that journey is the Master Sword, with the Guardian Spirit Fi also sealing herself inside the Master Sword at the end of Skyward Sword, so throughout time she can continue to guide it towards the hero. Ocarina of Time even introduced the idea that because of its ability to repel evil, only the Master Sword can defeat Ganon, with it being given multiple other names throughout the series, like the Sacred Sword, the Sword that seals the darkness, and the Blade of Evil's Bane. All this gives the Master Sword a very traditional feeling, like it was plucked right out of an old English story. I mean, it is very clearly inspired by the Sword in the Stone from Arthurian legend, with the way it's often sealed inside stone pedestals that only the hero can pull it out of. It just feels very refined and elegant compared to other video game swords. It doesn't need some flashy gimmick like the Menard or the Buster Sword to be cool. It just looks like a regular short sword. But over decades of people using the Master Sword throughout adventures in the Legend of Zelda franchise, it has been elevated to legendary status. In a way, the Master Sword represents Nintendo's very game design philosophy, taking simple, time-tested ideas and refining them to perfection, with some new stuff thrown in here and there to keep it interesting. Gameplay-wise, it's rarely the strongest. Like Ocarina of Time, you get the Master Sword as part of the story, but if you do an optional side quest, you get the Bigoron Sword, which deals more damage. And then there's the open world games Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, where it's pretty middle of the road strength-wise, and you can completely skip it if you want to.
I can't help but feel this only adds to its allure as a refined weapon though. Sure, it's not the strongest, but that's because it has no weakness. You can't use a shield with the Biggoron sword equipped, and the Master Sword is the only weapon in the open world games that doesn't break, making it the most reliable option. Plus, it still clutches up when you need to. In Hyrule Castle and other areas full of evil, its power doubles, and in Breath of the Wild this buff can be permanently unlocked as the DLC. Not being the strongest also serves as an important incentive for people to go and experience more of the game. If they really want to just rush straight through, the Master Sword would be enough, but to excel, they have to interact with the side content that fleshes out the world. For all this, the Master Sword gets 5 across the board. Anything else wouldn't be fitting of what I believe is the greatest sword in gaming.
Well, I think today was a pretty successful day.
Yeah, but you didn't cut anything.
I know, but I still learned a lot. So I guess the moral of the story is, what's most important in life is... There he is! There's that yoga man! I'm gonna kill him!
Okay, think. What's most important in being a swordsman?
Looking badass.
Hell yeah. What the hell?
What's going on?
I think you cut the lens.
Well, can you fix it?
I don't know how.
Well, come on, man. I can't afford another camera.
You could afford this one, you stole it from Walmart!
And I can't afford to steal another one.